Another milestone on my Craftsman T210 100 hours of runtime. This was just a few days after my 3-year milestone. I've been looking forward to this. I'm ready, the mower is ready, hood off for easy access. Let's get going. First, we need to know what all is to be done. The column for 100 hours only has 2 check boxes, but 100 hours means we're also covering every column before it. For me, I'm going to cover practically everything on this list with the exception of valve lash, which per the engine manual says is a 200-hour service item. One thing I won't be showing in this video is any of the before each use items, since those are basic standards that we should all be doing before each and every mow. I also won't be going straight down item by item in order. I do things more of a top-down approach, deviating where convenience dictates. For starters, I like to drain the oil. A cakewalk on this 5400 series Kohler engine. I thought though that I used a 1-liter Evian bottle on my first oil change, so I was a bit surprised when this one started filling up to the point where I had to make some unplanned adjustments to my collection procedure. I determined the extra oil is due to me upgrading the oil filter from the standard to the yellow Pro Performance filter, just enough extra oil to fill up that 1-liter bottle. The oil itself looks exactly like I expect it to look at 50 hours of use. No sparkles or shavings or concerning colors, just used oil. One of the things that sold me on this T210 was this 5400 series engine's vertical oil filter. In theory, this is a less mess design since the filter doesn't instantly pour out its contents when it's loosened. Attention still needs to be paid though. Getting that filter past the 2 lines below it without a spill does require some dexterity. We're now ready for the new Pro Performance filter replacement. Always oil the seal before installation, and if you're smart, you will pre-fill the filter before you install it. It won't be like me. Get it installed and realize you didn't do that step. Have to remove, pour the filter full of oil, and then reinstall again. One major observation, the old filter did not say made in India like this one. I guess India is one of the global parts referenced on the Made in the USA sticker. I like to use factory oil along with my factory filter parts, the oil viscosity of choice, per the manual, the Kohler 10W30 synthetic blend. It's got me this far with no problems. Along with change the oil, the dash readout also said change the air filter. And I gotta admit, this looked far better than I was expecting. Now I have started blowing air up into the filter chamber. Apparently that has a major effect because this isn't bad at all. Of course, that is just the pre-filter. The actual filter, it's grabbing dust as it should, and looking at the outside versus looking at the inside, we can see that the performance is excellent. Here's a side-by-side comparison, the new filter versus the old one. When it comes to filters, factory parts are usually an advantage in my opinion. We'll install that new filter later. First, I want to clean the filter base. It only has a light coating of dust, but while I'm here, my cleaner of choice I will use is my favorite. Chemical Guys V07. I use this on the outside of the mower, even on the engine shroud after each mow, UV protection, and super effective. The service list includes cleaning the fan and air intake screen. I do that after each mow, so nothing to see here. I do want to add a step at this point though that's not in the instructions. I'm going to remove this engine shroud so I can get to the top case bolts. There is a specific torque specification for those and even a torque pattern. And I want to check just to make sure they're still tight, because this is a bucket design engine, a redesign of sorts of the Kohler Courage engine, and Courage engines were notorious for the bucket lid bolts working themselves loose. Now I haven't heard any reports of the 5400 series having the same problems, but it never hurts to check, and since I'm so close, without removing the flywheel though, I can only get to 8 of the 10. The 2 under the flywheel aren't the area where the Courage would loosen, so not that concerned if all the others check out. The Courage loosened in select spots, and I gave a look at each area and I see no signs of seepage or cracks on this engine. It's my torque wrench though that will tell the tale. The sequence chart in iShot, I check all accessible bolts, and pleasantly none were loose. Exactly what I wanted to see. Trust me, a Courage at 100 hours of use, 1 or 2 would have already worked below torque spec, and that bodes well for this 5400 series. And how about this? For a bike-centric kind of guy, I got to use my bike tool torque wrench to torque the fan shroud bolts. Now it's time to put that new air filter in place. I did reuse the previous pre-filter as it was already oiled and easily cleaned with my air compressor. Note another filter made in India. A quick peep at that checklist. Clean battery terminals, I inspect those regularly, so nothing to do here, but eyeball them again. I use a float charger often, hence a regular inspection happens by default each time I hook that charger up. Grease all lubrication points. I start off by doing what I do every 10 hours. I grease the front spindle supports and the wheel axle, and if you ever wondered where the grease goes up here, it's around the axle and then into the cap. Nothing fancy, but it works. Then I whip out the WD-40 PTFE spray. This is a dry lube that doesn't attract dirts. And note, this isn't standard WD-40, it's Teflon based. I go over each and every moving part. Anything that has a bushing or a pin or is just a moving part, it gets dry lubed, including the deck wheels, both of them, as well as inspecting them to make sure they're holding up well. Inspection of the deck belt, the spindles, the pulleys, and every other working component on the deck. For me, this is more of a regular checkup item during my post-cut mower cleanings. 3 years and 100 hours in, everything still looks good, including the belt. Some of these checklist items, interestingly worded, check that all hardware is in place and secure. Okay, the seat, the steering wheel, the engine, the deck, yep, it all looks good to me. In the manual, the intake screen is mentioned 2 different ways. I suspect one of them is the grill on the hood. This is a source of cooling, so it's important to keep it unobstructed, free and clear. Though not mentioned anywhere, also PTFE, the rubber grommets on the steering knuckles. Engine mounting bolt torque. This is important and to be done every 50 hours, making this my second check. And just like the last time at 50 hours, all the bolts are still perfectly torqued. Spark plug inspection. I'm looking at spark plug color, at the electrodes, and at the insulator condition, and also checking the gap, which is still at the recommended .030. Reinstalling the plug. Another chance to use my torque wrench, since there is a provided torque specification. Check the fuel system, which I interpret as checking the gas cap function, the gas tank to make sure nothing is leaking, looking at the fuel lines and the carb vacuum line, make sure they're all in good shape without any cracks or problems. This is also where I'll be changing the fuel filter. And this is a point where I cringe whenever I'm watching a video on YouTube and someone uses vice grips to clamp a line. I have multiple sets of nice line clamp tools, but I can't find a single one. So hypocrite moment, as I too use vice grips. This Kohler factory fuel filter completes the Made in India trifecta. One note about replacing this fuel filter, the inside clamp is hard to get to, so make sure you have those prongs aimed to either the side or down. You don't want vibration and bouncing for more use to cause it to rub against the vacuum line. If all that's good, the fuel system gets a check mark. Now it's time to get on the ground and a chance for me to use my Craftsman mower lift, which is a rebranded Mojack. I need to get under the deck because the checklist says to inspect the blade torque and clean the deck. I go one step further. I replace the blades entirely, and I do this on a yearly basis, usually in time for leaf mulching season. We're so close that I'm going to go ahead and change them now, which by default also allows me to inspect the spindle bearings, the star guides, the spindle threads, and anything else that catches my eye under the deck. Everything looks great, no wobbles or signs of wear. I always torque the blades down well, so would have been surprised if there were any issues. I also inspect the old blades, even though I'm going to replace them. I noticed when I was taking off one of these, what looked like a melted plastic bushing or some kind of spacer I wasn't aware of. At first I thought this was a spindle bearing seal. Upon closer inspection, it's the rope that I showed wrapped around the blade in a previous video, a non-issue. I also thought that one of these blades had a slight warp. I saw it in the last video. Turns out that's not the case, so I'll sharpen these and save them as spares. Let's talk about these new blades because they're from the exact same link that I ordered the old ones from. They are made in the USA, the same thickness, the same weight, but they're different. The tooth pattern is slightly changed, slightly different lift. Hoping maybe that's an improvement. I've really been happy with the old blades, so if these new ones aren't an improvement, don't be surprised if you see those old ones sharpened back up and put back into action. Cleaning the deck. The instructions, I believe, mean the top side, which I do after each mow. The bottom, you're supposed to use a washboard, so that should get clean. I use the washboard religiously, and it keeps the deck clean, very clean on the underside. Though I have noticed with Gator blades, I had to increase the wash time by a couple of minutes. You can see there are a few very small areas of buildup. So while I'm under here, I'm going to scrape this off. I'm going to use a small screwdriver and clean each and every spot, end up with a very spotless underside and a deck that is in very good condition. This is 3 years old, 100 hours of use, and it's still, well, there's no rust anywhere, even around the spindle bolt areas where they usually rust, even on the deck lip. The scratches that are there, they're not rusting. This is a nice deck. I expect many, many more years of perfect function out of it. Time to put on the new blades. You may have noticed I used a large impact to remove the blades, and I'm using a smaller one for the installation. The large one's 250 foot-pounds. Torque spec is 70 to 90. The small impact scales right up to that. Well, it's actually up to 120 foot-pounds, but I've gotten pretty good at hitting between 70 and 90 with it. So it's my go-to for blade installation. And that's it, except for the very basics of the basics, the daily checks. I've covered every item on the checklist and more. And I hereby certify this as a properly 100-hour serviced Craftsman riding mower. T210 model, the same procedures hold true for the renamed version, the Craftsman T2200, and it's also the same procedures for all similar MTD-made 42-inch riding mowers currently sold. Drop me a note in the comments if you have any questions or if you have any extra steps that you take when servicing your mower. Let me hear about those. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it informative, and if you haven't already, I hope you subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.